What we have here is a setup. You don't get a warrant, send an FBI SWAT team to a former president's home to grab documents. How do I know that? I'm the only person on this network, or almost any network, who was chief of staff to an attorney general. I know you've had Bill Barr say things. I mean, an attorney general like Ed Meese. You know what he would have done? He would have said, you want me to send my guys into a federal court to get a criminal warrant against a former president over documents? Do you know what kind of constitutional issues that'll raise? Do you know what kind of impact that'll have on the future election? I'm not going to set fires all over the place. Let me give him a call. That's what he would have done. How do I know? I used to sit next to the man. If that didn't work, he still would have done something else, gone civilly with the matter. There is no way in hell he would have done what Biden obviously was encouraging his attorney general to do, or the rogue attorney general did. What else has the totalitarian Democrat Party done? Well, their surrogates tried to take Trump off the ballot with some cockamamie interpretation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which was always bizarre. But hey, anything that can work, so they tried to do that. So what else have they done? Well, my first guest, Congressman leading the investigation of the January 6th committee, Congressman Loudermilk, the January 6th committee destroyed massive amounts of information, manipulated witnesses, censored certain witnesses, only put out information they wanted, covered up exculpatory information that they didn't want to provide, and took the most important piece of evidence Donald Trump had to prove that he had nothing at all to do with any riot, any violence, any sedition, any insurrection, which would completely destroy the Democrat Party and their media's narrative. He did, in fact, offer the National Guard. He did, in fact, offer 10,000 members. He did, in fact, the night before January 6th, call the acting Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller, and say again, do you guys have enough resources and so forth? It actually happened. And yet Liz Cheney and that committee has continued to say it never happened. They're lying. The whole argument that's been going on and on, repetition of the big lie, is totalitarian. That Trump led an insurrection. They don't have a syllable of evidence to support it. Not a thing. Which is why he's not charged with it, which is why, in the end, the Senate had to find him not guilty of. The U.S. attorney and the former DA in Manhattan took a pass on the Bragg case. I just want to make that abundantly clear. We're here with Congressman Barry Loudermilk, the congressman from Georgia, House Financial Services Committee member and a subcommittee chairman. Congressman Loudermilk, you put out an 81-page report, and you've made it abundantly clear, both on my radio show and elsewhere, that as you look into the conduct of this January 6th committee, you're finding things that are extraordinarily troubling to you and your other members. That is, among other things, the mass destruction of evidence, whether it's video, whether it's deposition, whether it's text, whether it's emails, the movement of certain information behind firewalls, encrypted, so you folks have been unable so far, even with forensic experts, to break through and get the information. Most of this occurred a week before the Republicans took over the House, so it was done in a very aggressive way and done in a purposeful way. But you've also found a number of substantive things involving whether or not President Trump did in fact offer the National Guard. Liz Cheney has been running around and said that's false. Liz Cheney keeps referring people to the report. Liz Cheney keeps doubling down. Also, you have information from a witness who did in fact testify, but was not included in the public pronouncements about January 6th, a deputy chief of staff to the president, and on and on and on, information about Cassidy Hutchinson. So let's begin. Number one, in terms of this committee destroying and hiding information, have you made any progress?
Well, we've made progress in actually getting access to some of the documents that they moved to the executive branch, in my opinion, which was to keep it from public view and keep it from us. 4 documents went to the White House. 8 documents went to the Department of Homeland Security. We were able to get the redacted copies of the testimonies of White House employees, which we included in our report. And through pressuring the White House, we're finally they never gave us unredacted copies, but they allowed us to come to the White House and review the unredacted copies. And after looking at it, we realized there's enough in that was remained unredacted in the copies they sent us that showed a different story than what the select committee was presenting. DHS, for months, they just went silent on us. Now they're telling us, oh, we still haven't finished our review of these documents. It's been well over a year. They're slow walking it. But we have at least now have Homeland Security is, as of last week, said, well, look, you can come look at these documents as well. But for some reason, they sent us the key document that we were looking for, which was the transcribed interview of the driver of the SUV that Trump was supposedly take the steering wheel from. So we did make some progress there. We're still trying to break passwords. But the biggest, I think, violation of public trust and House rules was the destruction or the hiding of the videotapes of all the depositions. Those, I think, are clearly, they admitted to getting rid of those. And so of everything that they've done, I think that is the biggest violation.
Let's dig in a little bit further, Congressman. This National Guard issue, I had the acting Defense Secretary, Christopher Miller, on my radio show about a year ago. He said everything you're reading in the media is not true, and hearing from the Democrats is being spun that, in fact, Donald Trump did offer the National Guard. He offered it in front of him. He offered it to him. That is, he told him to be ready in case they're called up. Kash Patel, as Chief of Staff, has said the same thing. So they're trashing both of these men. They're twisting what they have said. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Mark Meadows testified that they had a National Guard unit specifically positioned at Andrews Air Force Base, should it be necessary. And the former Secretary of Defense also told me on radio that he believed it was January 5th, the day before, that he got a call from President Trump. He wanted reassurance, did President Trump, that in fact we were in a position to help and that everybody had everything they need. And you also came in touch with a witness and witness information, I believe it was Deputy Chief of Staff, in which he heard most of this and actually heard the mayor of D.C. turn down any help. Is that right?
That's correct. And that was one of the supposedly missing documents. That was Tony Ornato, who was the Deputy Chief of Staff to Mark Meadows over operations. Now, he had been the head of a Secret Service detail until President Trump promoted him to the Deputy Chief of Staff of Operations. And we knew that he had done multiple transcribed interviews with the committee, but there was one that was just commonly referred to as the missing Ornato interview. And our team, through a lot of diligence and digging, we were able to find that. And exactly what you just said was in there, that he had testified to the committee that he heard the conversation with Mark Meadows offering up to 10,000 troops. And even in early January, not long after the attack on the Capitol, Vanity Fair, of all publications, had ran an article that Trump had offered National Guard and told Secretary Miller, you have full authorization to get the Guard ready. That was in January by a liberal publication. So there is much more evidence. We even have evidence from the White House transcribed interviews that we received from the White House employees, where one of them said that responded to a question by the Select Committee, which was, when President Trump first heard of the attack on the Capitol, what was his response? And this White House employee who was physically with the president that day said his immediate response was, get Pelosi and Milley on the phone and see what help they need. There are several instances of on the record where he had offered and even was trying to get people to take the National Guard. But it was Pelosi, it was Bowser that turned down the offer.
But it was crucial that they destroy the truth. It was crucial that they cover it up. It was crucial that witnesses that corroborate the president's position, that people who had evidence that would demonstrate that the president did what he said he did, it was crucial that those people be silenced, that they not be heard, that their information be killed, that they not have public testimony when the Klieg lights were there. And so this whole argument about Donald Trump leading an insurrection, impeached on an insurrection, charged with the Klan Act and the rest, but still the environment is created about an insurrection. Donald Trump was never, ever ever involved in or promoted an insurrection. And as a rational matter, Congressman, if you're supporting an insurrection, wouldn't there be an email, a text, a sentence, a witness anywhere who said, I heard Trump say we're going to take the building. I heard him call it so-and-so and say we're going to do these things, not one word. When we come back, Cassidy Hutchinson, who was a key witness and a darling of the media, and wrote.
Tina Coleman in Los Angeles. The suspect in a deadly shooting and hostage situation that spanned 2 states is now in custody. 26-year-old Andre Gordon allegedly killed his stepmother, his 13-year-old sister, and the mother of his 2 children in Bucks County, Pennsylvania earlier today before carjacking someone and driving to a home in Trenton, New Jersey. That led to an hours-long standoff with police. Gordon was arrested after he was spotted leaving the house.
What about Cassidy Hutchinson, who Liz Cheney took under her wing, who got an enormous amount of publicity, who wrote a book? What about her?
Well, she's very interesting because she was interviewed probably more than anyone else. Her first 3 interviews by the committee lined up with everyone else that they had met, that they had invited in to testify. But what's interesting, and some of this we've derived from Cassidy Hutchinson's book and Liz Cheney's book, is after her 3rd transcribed interview, she had a meeting with Liz Cheney. After that meeting, she fired her existing attorney. Liz Cheney arranged for her to get a different attorney, and then they held a 4th transcribed interview. But unlike the others, this was just her and Liz Cheney in Liz's hideaway office in the Capitol, and the only others present was a court reporter and a videographer. No other member of the committee knew that this interview was going on. Afterwards, Liz Cheney showed the videotape of her testimony, and the committee moved to have an emergency hearing at that moment to parade her in front of America that she could tell these sensational stories. They never tried to corroborate her story at all. In fact, going forward, I told our team as we start looking at all these transcribed interviews, don't just look at the way people answer questions, look at the questions that were asked, and more importantly, the questions that weren't asked. And many times they would not ask firsthand. People had a firsthand account of these instances. They wouldn't even ask these questions because they didn't want anyone to give a testimony counter to what Cassidy Hutchinson had testified.
And that includes the so-called beast, the presidential limousine, where she conveys this story where Donald Trump is struggling with the Secret Service agent who's driving the car, grabs him by the neck, which is so preposterous. She wasn't there, so it's all hearsay, if worse. They put her in front of the Klieg lights. It's headlines everywhere, but they didn't bring in the people who were actually involved that day, including the driver, the Secret Service driver, and the others, who I understand from you and your report said none of that ever happened, correct?
That is correct. But he had to interject that. So she made these accusations in June. They didn't call the driver in until September. Of course, this is already national news, and they're pushing this narrative that Trump is this irate guy who's crazy, who's tried to choke a Secret Service officer, tried to grab the steering wheel from this guy. You would think when they bring this guy in, that is one thing they would ask him. They didn't even ask him if that incident was true. He had to interject it on his own. That right there tells me they did not want to get to the truth. They had their predetermined narrative. They were going to suppress anything that countered these sensational stories that Ms. Hutchinson came up with. And again, hers was third party. She said she heard Tony Ornato. Tony Ornato called her over after the speech on the Ellipse and said, "Did you hear what happened in the Beast?" Tony Ornato testified in the same transcribed interview that we released. That never happened. He never told her anything like that and had never heard of that story at all until she testified to it in June. And so, again, they suppressed anything that was contrary to what Ms. Hutchinson said because her story played right into the narrative that they wanted to sell the American people.
You have to assume all this material that was destroyed, interviews and all the rest, actually cut against their narrative. Otherwise, why would they destroy it? That is a perfectly legitimate, intentional. Somebody ordered it. And you have to assume they're witnesses to this. Liz Cheney has made herself the face and the voice of this committee. She's doubled down. She's been all over the internet, trashing anybody who disagrees with her, keeps referencing them to page whatever it is of the report, which, of course, is not the final say. And so my question to you is this. Are we going to be able to get to the bottom of this? The destruction of the information and the use of this committee and our tax dollars to advance another horrendous hit job on the former president and his staff on behalf of the Democrat Party? Are we going to be able to get to the bottom of this? In other words, at some point before the next election, because God only hopes you guys hold on, but you may not, are we going to have testimony under oath, under penalty of perjury by Liz Cheney and others, so we can get to the bottom of this, have them straighten it out, turn to the pages of the report they want you to show, and then show them the other information and ask them how that information didn't get into this report and so forth and so on?
Well, Mark, that is our plan. We still have a lot more investigation to go. We're going to build upon what we laid out in this report. We're already working overtime now on the next phase of information. And once we compile all that together, at some point, we're going to need people who were on that committee, and we're going to call them in.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
It's not about justice, it's not about agenda, it's not about mobilizing people, it's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.